Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Here's a story that's horribly embarrassing for pretty much everyone involved in it. And it really makes you wonder because of the attention this wound up bringing to a large corporation. Ex-eBay executives headed to prison for harassing a couple behind a newsletter. So Nate Raymond wrote this for Reuters. Nick, Dooley, and Mark all sent it to me. Thanks a lot. But two former eBay security executives were sentenced to prison for carrying out a campaign to harass and intimidate a couple in Massachusetts through threats and disturbing home deliveries after their online newsletter drew the ire of the company's then CEO. So there's the company eBay, we know about them, and there's a couple that publishes a newsletter. And somebody at eBay didn't like the newsletter. And so this is what wound up happening. These two men were sentenced to 57 and 24 months in prison, respectively, for their roles in an extensive harassment campaign that involved sending the couple cockroaches, a funeral wreath, and a bloody Halloween pig mask. You know, this is the kind of thing where you look at it and go, okay, I guess I kind of understand what these people are trying to do, but how bizarre. U.S. District Judge Patty Saris, who imposed the sentences during hearings in Boston, called it a hard-to-imagine scheme fueled by a toxic culture at the Silicon Valley e-commerce company. It was extreme and outrageous. She ordered one of the men, the former senior director of safety and security, and its former director of global resiliency, to also pay fines of $40,000 and $20,000 after pleading guilty to cyber stalking related charges. And so one of the guys, his title was Director of Global Resiliency. And I've occasionally poked fun at some of the corporate speak that we encounter in the news. And when you have these companies with these made-up positions, and I know someone's going to go, Steve, no, I've heard of global resiliency before as a department at a corporation. It's a common thing nowadays. Sure it is. The director of global resiliency was involved in this scheme, and it makes you wonder, is this part of his job? In court, they each apologized to the married couple in Massachusetts who produced a newsletter called E-Commerce Bites and spoke of being relentlessly terrorized by these employees. As agents of eBay, they made our lives a living hell, the husband told the judge. Prosecutors said senior executives deemed the newsletter critical of eBay. Oh my gosh, somebody was critical of eBay. Alert the media. And in August 2019, then Chief Executive Officer texted another executive that it was time to take her down, referring apparently to the wife of the husband-wife team. Now, the person there, who at that time was the CEO, is a former Thomson Reuters executive, and they mention it because this story is being published by Reuters. That person has stepped down as the CEO in September of 2019, was not charged in this brouhaha, though 7 other people were. A spokesman said that CEO had absolutely zero knowledge of the actions that were undertaken, even though the CEO was said to have told somebody to take her down. And the question is, how do you take down somebody who's not doing anything illegal? So overseeing the campaign was the first man, and he was a former CIA employee who, according to his lawyer, felt pressure to do something. And I'm really curious to know about those CIA credentials, because it's kind of like being a Navy SEAL. A lot of people say that they work for the CIA. It makes you wonder. At that man's direction, the couple received anonymous, harassing Twitter messages, bizarre emails, and unwanted home deliveries like spiders and a book on surviving the loss of a spouse. And so they're going to say, oh, that wasn't a death threat. No, we didn't say we were going to kill anybody. We're simply sending a book on how you deal with the loss of your spouse should your spouse happen to get lost somehow. The prosecutor said that other eBay employees were involved, including one who was recruited by a contractor for an op. We're going to do an op to surveil the couple who put out the newsletter. and then tried unsuccessfully to install a GPS tracker on their car. So we're conducting an op. A lawsuit by the couple against eBay is still pending. And yes, they're suing eBay and the people who did this. So this is simply the criminal aspect, the criminal side of the transaction. And keep in mind that there's a lot of things out there that you can do wrong for which you can get arrested and charged and possibly convicted, but you can also get sued for it. So you might say, Steve, what are they going to sue these people for? It depends on the state, but a lot of states have got a thing called the intentional infliction of emotional distress. If you do something that's outrageous in an attempt to scare somebody, frighten somebody, make somebody scared for their life, to make them miserable, and that's your only intention, be aware of the fact that when you get caught, you're going to have a really, really hard time explaining why you did that. Because many things that people get sued for are accidental or negligence. I didn't mean to do this, but it happened. It was an accident. But when you do something intentionally, hence the first I in intentional infliction of emotional distress, which is often abbreviated as IIED, intentional infliction, when you do something intentionally, you have a hard time going into court and going, I accidentally mailed those spiders and that book about the loss of a spouse and the bloody pig's nose. That was accidental. No, that was intentional. You actually went and bought the item, and then you packaged it up, and you addressed it to somebody and sent it to them anonymously. And you did that on purpose. You did it intentionally. And as a tort, it means that you can be sued for it. And when you get sued for it, the people who were victimized by your actions are going to be able to go into court and say, here's what it did to us. And they're asking for damages, compensation for the emotional distress they went through. And it appears there was a campaign by several people at a large corporation to frighten these people. And that would be a prototypical case of intentional infliction of emotional distress if these facts bear out, which it appears they're going to. Because remember, it's harder to prove a criminal case than a civil case because the standard of proof is higher. So these people plead guilty to doing this. They're going to have a really hard time going into civil court and going, but we didn't do it. It's too late. You've already admitted it. So these guys here have apologized in open court on the record to the couple. So it'll be very, very difficult for them to say, but we didn't do it. It's going to be one of those cases where liability is pretty straightforward. It's the amount of the damages. And it sounds like it was an extensive campaign. So that is a crazy case. It's one of the craziest cases I've ever heard of involving people at a big corporation. And the weird part is that eBay is one of the companies that a lot of people complain about. And I remember when eBay first came on the scene and you discovered that there was a marketplace where you could find almost anything for sale. The craziest stuff pops up on eBay. So people go, that's pretty cool. But then you start hearing stories about people buy stuff off of eBay and it's not as represented, and what's your remedy? And worse, you sell something on eBay and the person who bought it from you says things like, I never got it, or files complaints about you as a seller. And I know, people who sold stuff on eBay who had issues with arguments they got into, including getting emails from a buyer saying, if you don't give me some money back, I'm going to give you a 1-star rating or whatever. I don't remember exactly how the eBay rating system works, but I haven't bought anything off eBay in years. But I do recall many examples. And the other one was with eBay Motors. People said they bought cars off of eBay that were supposedly protected by some protection plan, and the car didn't show up as promised. And when they filed complaints, they suddenly found themselves dealing with a third party, which was acting more like an insurance company than as if they were dealing directly with eBay, which they weren't. So there are a lot of people out there who've got complaints about eBay. And for whatever reason, this couple really upset eBay to the point where these guys went above and beyond in how they tried to get back at them. And now they're both going to prison. And apparently there's more who could be in trouble. But 57 months for one, 24 months for the other. And that, my friends, is a crazy story. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. In life, it's not where you go, it's who you travel with.